Hi everyone, this is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here this morning to film a video about what I've recently read and what I'm currently reading. I'm filming outside again because you all seem to enjoy that the last time I did it, and I hope that the bird song is not too loud, and I hope that the slight breeze that we have this morning doesn't cause too much wind noise. So we'll give it a try and see what happens, and off we will go. So the very first thing I'd like to talk about is a book that I buddy read with Patrice Jones. A few weeks ago we finished this, but it's We Need New Names by NoViolet Bulawayo. This book I read, I had picked it for a book about with an immigrant theme for the Reading Women Challenge, and this is a favorite book from a lot of people. I know Sean the Book Maniac has raved about this book, and I would just like to join the ranks of those of you who thought this was an excellent book, because I really love this book. This is a book about a character named Darling. She is from Zimbabwe, and the book opens up from her perspective as a child in Zimbabwe. She's like, I don't even know how old she is when we start, but a young child, and just sort of playing with her friends in her community in Zimbabwe. And we see, you know, what its life is like at that time. There's been some kind of civil unrest, and society, you know, she has gone from being sort of a normal middle class type kid to a kid living in severe poverty. There's not much food, there's not much shelter, but still she and her friends do kid stuff. They just find the joy in life, even though there's a lot of violence and there's a lot of unrest, and they're hungry a lot of the times, and they're dealing with things like AIDS, but they're still just kids playing with each other and making up games and getting into mischief and all of that sort of thing, with this backdrop of this violence and all this unrest around them. About midway through the story, Darling gets sent to America to live with an aunt, and to sort of get her out of this bad situation at home. And so then we see Darling trying to adapt to new life in America and trying to deal with a new culture that's so different than her own. Not only the culture, but the language, how children are treated, everything, how school works is so different from what she's used to. And she does a very good job of sort of keeping under the radar and not drawing attention to herself, and sort of studying her new environment and figuring out how to manage. I really liked her voice in this book. And what was interesting to me, and Patrice and I talked about it a lot in our chats about this book, was I think as an American, our assumption is that life is going to be better for immigrant children when they come from sort of places that are war-torn, or places where there's been a lot of civil unrest or deep poverty, that, you know, it's just automatically better for kids to be brought to America and grow up in America. And this book really shows that that is a false assumption, and we should not make that assumption, that there's beauty and joy everywhere to be found, and that America is not always a wonderful place to live. And is certainly, there's plenty of danger for children right here in America. As much as we like to think that we keep our kids safe, there's plenty of things that are dangerous for kids in America. They may be different things. They may be technological or gang related, or, you know, just different, but still dangerous and not healthy for kids. So that was really interesting. I really loved that. I really loved the way this book made me think. This is an excellent book. Highly recommend it. The next book that I want to talk about is another buddy read book, and I read this book, Cannibalism by Bill Schutt, with Doris from Aldi Books. And this is a nonfiction book, and it's all about cannibalism. And what's interesting, and what Doris and I both enjoyed about this book, is it doesn't just take, you know, just doesn't go from example to example to example of different creatures that engage in cannibalism. It actually takes themes, you know, like survival, or other types of adaptations that animals might have, and why cannibalism is a good strategy for them or not a good strategy for them. And I really liked the thematic kind of way that this book explored the topic. Bill Schutt writes with a lot of humor. This is definitely a popular science book, so it's written for a popular audience. So he never delves too deeply into, there were a few parts where I thought he kind of went over the top when he talked about sort of DNA and genetics type stuff. He got a little bit into the weeds, I think, with some of the explanations they have. But for the most part, this book's very easy to follow and understand. Really uses a lot of examples that I think a lay person would understand. You don't need to have a scientific background to get a lot out of this book. And he's quite funny in places. Lots and lots of dad jokes, as Doris and I pointed out. Lots of dad jokes in this book. But it was super fun. A great time reading this with Doris. Definitely recommend this as well. And then the last book that I completed that I want to talk about is Obsidio. This is the third book in the Illumini files. This is a YA science fiction series written by Amie Kaufman and Kristoff. And these are very quick, fun reads, even though they're super chunky, because they're not written like a normal prose style. This story is told like it's a report that's been written after the fact. It's been compiled from different audio recordings, video recordings, interviews, intercepted emails or intercepted text messages. There's diagrams, there's all this stuff, and it tells a story of, I don't really want to get into too deeply what happens because obviously this is the third book in the series, but it's a space opera kind of a thing where in the first book a planet is attacked by a greedy corporate entity and basically destroys the planet, and a bunch of people escape on a large spaceship and are pursued by this evil corporation. And there's a bunch of high school kids that sort of are saving the day, you know, they're the heroes of the story. And each book sort of follows these groups of kids, and each book had a different focus on which kid it followed, or young people. I shouldn't say kids because they're young adults. I'm showing my age there. But they're really fun, and lots of action, and like I said, the way that they're laid out, like reports with all of these different, different ways of telling the story as compiled in a report, was very compelling to me. A super fun read, a great thing if you like science fiction and sort of want something light and easy to read. I think that you would really enjoy the Illumini files. Obsidio, like I said, is the third book, and the first one, let me see if I can find, I don't remember off the top of my head what the first one was called. Illumini, I'm not really sure how you say it, is the first one, and then Gemina is the second one, and then this one is the third one. So if you're looking for some fun sci-fi, I would recommend that. And now what I'm currently reading, I'm still reading Lolita and Tehran. This, I'm pretty, I'm like 3/4 of the way through this. This is a non-fiction memoir written by Azar Nafisi. She was a professor in Iran during the revolution, and so this book is written from her perspective and tells her story of living through that time period in Iran and how education was impacted, how teaching was impacted, how the rights of women were impacted. And in the midst of all this, she forms sort of a secret reading group with a bunch of women where they come to her home and discuss classic works of fiction from Western canon. So it is a good book, but it's a slow read for me. The style of this is very contemplative and meandering, I guess. It's not a driving narrative, so while I'm enjoying it, I'm not finding it super compelling, I guess is how I would put it. But I will be finishing it. I'm also reading a YA fantasy. This is actually a middle grade fantasy. This is Nevermoor, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. I believe this is the first book in a series, and I am buddy reading it with Leah from Hide and Seek. And I would call this a cross between Harry Potter and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's got lots of elements of both of those fantasy stories. It's super fun. It's super cute. It's very whimsical. Morgan Crow is a great character. There's lots of fantastical beasts and places and settings, and it's funny and it's light and it's just fun. So I'm enjoying that. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is I am reading The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This obviously is a humongous chunker. I think this book is over 1,200 pages long, not including the notes at the end. So it's super long. I am reading this as part of a read-along that's being hosted by Laura Frey, and I will link that down below if it's something you're interested in. We're on our we're reading 20 chapters a week so it's going to take probably 5 or 6 weeks to read it. So I've read the first 20 or so chapters for the first week, and for a book as large as this is, and it's got smaller font and all of that, it's a really engaging read. It's an adventure story. We're following Edmond Dantes, who has been in prison for a crime that he did not commit, and it's sort of a conspiracy. Some people conspired. I can talk. Some people conspired against him, and he's been thrown in prison. This takes place in the 1840s, so it's Napoleon has been deposed and stuck, in his island prison, and he gets wrapped up in some of this intrigue around Napoleon, and he basically becomes the fall guy for a bunch of people who are either jealous of him or who are trying to further their own political career. And so the first 20 chapters take place, this conspiracy happens, he gets tossed in jail, and then, the story ensues goes on from there, and what happens to him once he gets into prison. It's an adventure story. It's written in a very, what's the story? How do I want to say this? It propels itself along very nicely for a classic novel. You want to find out what happens next. It's not dry and boring, and I'm really enjoying it so far, and I think it's fun. Dantes is a character that at first you're like, oh, I don't know. He's like one of these white guys that's like everything good is coming to him just because he's handsome, and he's fairly good at his job, so everybody loves him. But then you're like, oh, but wait. He's also inspiring jealousy in people, and maybe all this good fortune isn't going to last for him. And so it kind of turned that on its head of the trope of, if you're handsome and you come from a good family and you're hardworking, you're just going to be so successful and you're going to get the beautiful girl in the end and all that sort of thing. And it kind of takes that and flips it. It says, well, yeah, but maybe sometimes that doesn't always work out. So I'm interested to see what happens to good old Dantes now. And I don't want to spoil anything about it, even though I know it's, classic and probably everybody already knows it. But I'm not going to be the one to give away any of the tidbits here. So, but very much enjoying it. And want to give a shout out to Mel's husband, Anthony, from Mel's Brooklyn Adventures, because his enthusiasm for this book actually inspired me to purchase it last winter, and I'm super glad to be reading it now. So that is what I have recently read and what I'm currently reading. I hope that you guys are all reading great stuff here. Here we are in mid-July already. I can't believe it. Please let me know in the comments down below what you've been reading and loving recently, and I will talk to you later.